The Sony Xperia 1 Mark V, the company's newest flagship smartphone, has been made public by Sony. What has changed with the new Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV model that it replaces? Although they have a similar appearance, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark V differs from the Xperia 1 Mark IV in a number of crucial ways, including processor speed, thermal performance, and camera hardware. The latter was a significant problem with the Xperia 1 Mark IV, and Sony has made great efforts to ensure that it won't be the same scenario this year. However, we won't be able to confirm this until we receive a sample for review. In light of all of this, we've listed some of the most significant differences between the £1,299 Sony Xperia 1 Mark V and the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV in advance of the latter's formal availability in June. If you're interested in seeing how it compares to the flagship rivals, check out our individual comparisons of the Sony Xperia 1 Mark V and Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. The camera configuration, and more specifically the rear main lens, is the primary distinction between the Sony Xperia 1 Mark V from this year and the Xperia 1 Mark IV from 2022. Along with an increase in resolution, camera sensor technology has also improved. While we felt that the Xperia 1 Mark IV's main 12-megapixels lens was adequate but not nearly as powerful as the spec sheet would imply, especially with hit-and-miss exposure and simplistic image processing. This shouldn't be the case with the new Xperia 1 Mark V. This is because the Sony Xperia 1 Mark V has a brand new 52-megapixels XMOR-T sensor with a CMOS and a special 2-layer transistor that, according to Sony, is twice as good at taking nighttime photos as its predecessor. Additionally, the sensor is 1.7 times larger than that of the Xperia 1 Mark IV, and Sony claims that when combined with its more sophisticated computational photography, it can take pictures that are comparable to those taken with a conventional DSLR. We'll put that big claim to the test once we receive a sample for review, because it might make it one of the greatest photography phones available. There is very little, if any, difference between zoom and ultra-wide lenses. The cameras on both versions have optical image stabilization, and each have a 12-megapixels f2.2 ultra-wide and a 12-megapixels 85 to 125mm f2.3 2.8 telephoto. The Qualcomm Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 is the company's most recent and finest processor, and it powers the Sony Xperia 1 Mark V. While we haven't tested the Xperia 1 Mark V yet, we have used many smartphones with Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chipsets in recent months, including the OnePlus 11 and Xiaomi 13 Pro, and every single one of them has offered blazingly fast speeds in both real-world situations and benchmark tests. Here, we anticipate the same. However, the Sony Xperia 1 Mark IV, which came equipped with the industry-leading Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 CPU in early 2022, is not slow. In fact, we deemed the Xperia 1 Mark IV to be extremely capable in our assessment, and nothing has changed since then. However, because it isn't the most recent chipset, it won't be able to compete in benchmarks with newer 2023 flagships. Whichever option you select, you'll also receive 12 gigs of RAM and either 256 or 512 gigs of storage, depending on your choice. The Xperia 1 Mark IV may best be summed up in one word. Hot, and no, we're not referring to its attractive appearance. The high heat alert would display and deactivate several functionalities because it genuinely got hot very frequently. Additionally, the signal didn't always appear when playing demanding video games. It occasionally appeared when doing simple chores like downloading files while browsing the internet. This type of thermal performance meant that the chipset would frequently be throttled, which would negatively impact overall performance, but especially in games. Since the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 CPU has a reputation for running hot, we had a hunch that it had more to do with that than the actual hardware, but it appears Sony isn't taking any chances with the Xperia 1 Mark V this year. The phone has a heat diffusion sheet that is 60% larger than that of its predecessor, a more power-efficient Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip, and a camera module that is reported to use 20% less power, so maybe the overheating problems will be a thing of the past. The Xperia 1 Mark V and its predecessor both have 5000 mAh batteries, which should indicate parity in battery performance. However, due to the Xperia 1 Mark V's more power-efficient Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chipset, it will probably outperform its predecessor in real-world tests. However, we won't know for sure until we receive a sample for review. In any case, Sony promises that it can last 20 hours of 4K video playback, or for those who aren't into watching videos, a whole day of mixed use, which is a little bit longer than the Xperia 1 Mark IV can. With the same 30-watt charging as its predecessor, the charging isn't quite as spectacular. That's good, but it's not at all quick compared to the Xiaomi 13 Pro's 125 watts charging, which charges its 5000 mAh battery to 100% in just 24 minutes. Although reverse wireless charging and wireless charging have made a comeback, none is any faster than that of the Xperia 1 Mark IV. What do you think about the new generation? Write your opinion in the comments. Thanks for watching, have a nice day and see you soon.